I was just a kid from South London who was rapping, and one day I sat down in my living room and I saw myself on MTV Base. I think when that happened, that allowed me to know that, you can really, make moves. Like, I never thought one day I'll see myself on that box. It wasn't favorable to join this or to become a Muslim. It wasn't really the cool thing to do within society.
Was it more like your passion for sneakers that kind of like led you into the whole, I want to do something to do with sneakers?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to give back. And at the time, all I had to give was trainers, I'd say. So for me to give you a pair of trainers, it meant a lot because my trainers were never just a standard pair of trainers. So I feel like that was the sacrifice. So meeting a homeless person, and I think Allah tested me.
One big road with a lot of signs and more signs. You gotta make up your mind to face reality all the time. No.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Journeys podcast. I'm joined today by a really inspiring brother I've been following for a long time on Instagram. He goes by the name of Musa, or at Revert to Islam. And he's the founder of the Resole Project, or Resole, which is an amazing project, which we're going to get into. The project is based in Brixton. Our brother Musa is from South London, born and raised. So welcome to the podcast, Musa.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What's good, man? I'm happy to be here, man. It's been a minute. Been trying to make it happen, but finally we're here. So alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. It's always, a lot of the people we've been getting on, they often have busy schedules, and then, things come up, family life. And so it's always a little bit tough to squeeze it in, especially with the time zone differences. But alhamdulillah, we managed to get you on. So I'd like to jump in, if we can, straight in, Musa. And if you just tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you're a revert to Islam. And how was life for you growing up? And how did you actually discover the religion of Islam?
So yeah, man, alhamdulillah, I've been a Muslim now for some 15 years. I can always count my Islam through my firstborn, as I had after becoming Muslim, within the first year or so, I got married to my wife, and we had our firstborn child, who is 15 years old now, turning 16 at the end of this year. So it always gives me a good way to kind of gauge my Islam and how long I've been Muslim. Alhamdulillah, we accepted Islam, I'd say, at a time where there was a lot of turmoil in the area that I grew up, especially amongst a lot of different sections of young men, where we grew up, especially in Brixton, Peckham, South London. It was difficult. There was a lot of gang violence, a lot of beef, a lot of things were going on. And alhamdulillah, there's a lyric that Muslim Bilal says in one of his nasheeds, and he says that something about Allah came to the ghetto and turned the gangster boys who used to walk around with metal, something. But it always, whenever I hear his nasheed, it reminds me, and I laugh, is that it's something like Allah sent his angels into the ghetto. And it was a profound statement, because without a shadow of a doubt, it was a time where a lot of us young men at that time in South London needed guidance. A lot of us needed a sense of direction. And sometimes it comes in strange ways. And I feel like a few of us, as I think you sometimes get that stigma of young men becoming Muslim and not taking it serious. But I think within life, there's always the odds that you got to beat. And I think looking back at it now, when I get to see 15 years on from that group of core young men who became Muslim, and I'm still able to have conversations with over a dozen of them, and they're still here practicing Islam with their families. A lot of us, alhamdulillah, managed to hold on and managed to get through. And I feel like it's never easy. I liken it to a football academy, where you grow up with your peers, and not everyone gets to make it to the Premier League. You know what I mean? Not everyone gets to make it to the big lights. And I feel like on that journey, yes, we did lose a few of the brothers and sisters looking back, but alhamdulillah, a lot of us are still here practicing, pushing strong, raising our families, living a Muslim lifestyle. And yeah, it was just difficult, man. I guess growing up, you know, in it was right around 2010 or just before then, 2008. It was just kind of difficult in South London as a whole. Very difficult time. And yeah, just maneuvering and having to understand who we were. And I think what happened at that time as well, a lot of the young men had a lot of passion for the religion. And I feel like our backgrounds kind of molded and shaped us and prepared us for what was to come. I think, you
Yeah.
know, the Jahiliyyah that we lived kind of molded us because we also accepted Islam in a time where, you know, the Twin Towers and terrorist attacks were taking place all over the world. It wasn't favorable to join this or to become a Muslim. It wasn't really the cool thing to do within society. So you had to have, you know, thick skin. You had to have strong backbone to then embrace a religion and go back to your family members and be like, oh, hey, guys, I'm Muslim. You know, a lot of people had difficulties.
I guess in a way, from what I took from your story there, or some of it, sometimes Allah almost prepares us with some of the experiences that we had before for what comes next. And, obviously that resilience that you grew up, where you grew up, maybe that was, to some degree a preparation for that resilience you needed to stay firm upon Islam. And I was speaking to another brother as well. He's also from South London. I think maybe quite a lot older than you and I. And he and actually some of his friends, they all became Muslim together. And I think that it was a great blessing in a way because so many of them embraced at a similar time. It meant that they had that kind of like almost support network where if you were just by yourself, you'd be a lot more isolated. I mean, was that something that was you think was a help, the fact that you had other people, your peers, who were also embracing at the same time?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I think it was. I think having that support network, having brothers who I looked at as some of the best of friends that I had in that period of time in Jahiliyyah, people who I think had a bit more to them. I feel like in Jahiliyyah, there was a few people who they didn't really have more to them as characters other than just being, just causing mischief and kind of being troublesome. I didn't think they had more to them. I think there was a few people that I grew up with who had another level to them, who done more away from just being on the block with the mandem. So they had more lived experiences, had traveled the world. Their parents had taken them abroad. They had gone on family holidays. And I think those small lived experiences are the difference between those who kind of see a broader scale of life to those that don't. Because if you're growing up on a block and you're all in a gang and you're just all mischievous on the block, but some of you have gone on family holidays to different parts of the world and have had that experience to realize, right, that the world is bigger than the block that I'm chilling on. So when you have family members, or even though a lot of us are coming from single parent households at the time, I feel like having that experience with family and then coming back to the block will kind of make you realize that, you know what, there's more to it. As for the children or the young people we grew up with who had never been on holiday, never got on a plane, their brain was very narrow. You know what I'm saying? Their thinking was very narrow and didn't have that type of foresight to realize that there's more to do. So some of those friends who had, a bit more lived experience were some of the people that I grew up with and embraced Islam. And even some of my friends, like example, Abu Bakr rose to Islam, who came from the Gambia at a good age. Sorry, he came to the UK from the Gambia around 10 years old, just leaving primary school. He had enough experience to realize there was a difference between where he grew up and where he was born in the Gambia to where he was at in the UK. And that was enough for him when it was crunch time and time to make a decision on, well, what am I doing with my life? He had something to call back on, something to remember, like, well, life wasn't always like this. Why am I taking, why am I not taking full advantage in a situation that I should be? So that was important, man. So yeah, man, growing up in South London without glamorizing it too much was that type of lifestyle. It was difficult. So I feel like when we embraced Islam, I was around, I'd say 20 years old when I embraced Islam. And at that time, it was a difficult period of time. But I feel like when I embraced Islam, at that age, like I said, a lot of us had a lot of passion for the religion. A lot of us had a lot of love for the religion. So we ventured out. A lot of my peers at that time, you know, the go-to place was to go to Egypt or to Yemen and to study Islam. I think a group of us who I grew up with, because we were more and really about this life in the streets, when we went away to these places, it wasn't even to study Islam, as some of the peers or some of the people at the time that we knew were going, who were maybe born Muslim. For us, it was to live Islam. How is
Yeah.
it to live? So while everyone was like, oh, yes, Arabic and Quran, and that was a part of it. But our thing was like, no, we've come here to get tarbiyah. We've come here to nurture ourselves, because we
Yeah.
only know how to live a certain type of life. We're here in Egypt, so we can live on a day-to-day basis, 24 hours a day as a Muslim, and only be known by our new names that we've taken on and our new descriptions and our new characters. We don't want to
Yeah.
grow up or be in an area where people are still looking at you as what you grew up to be. You know, we were really that man who killed 99 men, or 100 men, we should say, and was told to make that move out of that town. So we weren't then connected to what we were always known for. So a lot of us left. And alhamdulillah, we had a good period of time where a lot of us stayed in Egypt 3 to 4 years on average. And it allowed us to just kind of detox from the streets, from our environment, and then come back fully as a Muslim. Like, without no
Mashallah.
doubt, like for the last 3-4 years, I've lived as a Muslim. I've lived by the name
Yeah.
Musa. I'm no longer known. Like, everywhere I've gone, people are just, hey, Musa. Like, Abu Abdul Shaheed, Musa. So I've just got used to that. So then when I come back to the UK, it's weird hearing people calling me from what I used to be now. You know what I mean? I'm not really responding to that as quick as I used to. It's like, oh, right, hold on. Who's that? Someone shouting. Because I just got used to being me. And I think that was important. And I think I saw that, and I saw the difference that made between a lot of us who embraced Islam that went and got that tarbiyah and those that didn't. Because our default setting was very different. Meaning when we would fall off deen, to us falling off deen, those that went and got that tarbiyah meant praying at home and not going to the masjid to do your prayers. That's how we, looked at, I need to get on my deen. And it's like, well, what's wrong? But you pray. Like those who, didn't go away, we were like, no, you pray, man, you're all right, man. Alhamdulillah. Like, nah, man, it's in the masjid more. That's not enough.
Yeah.
Whereas for them, falling off deen meant not praying. And that's because we didn't get the tarbiyah. For us, it meant not praying in the masjid. That's what Egypt felt for us, because we just come from a country where you just spent 3 or 4 years and all your salats are in the masjid. Now you're just back in the UK doing what you're doing, and you're missing them, and you're not praying a lot of them in your home, and your heart's just not feeling right? So that was important to us at that period of time. And I feel like it was also a period of time that we kind of embraced that journey of also then wanting to give dawah to the people that we kind of left behind and the blocks that we came from.
Sure. I think as well, it's important, like an interesting point that you mentioned that I've sometimes discussed with some brothers and even my family, is sometimes obviously, when you live in a society in the West, when you compare it to whether it's Egypt or whether it's Saudi or all these Muslim countries, the kind of base morality is so very different that it works in exactly the way that you were saying, that obviously if you're in a society where, for example, it's just normal for women to be wearing very skimpy clothing and this, that, whatever, and then you come into, for example, Saudi Arabia, where, obviously the times are changing now, but, previously women used to be wearing like full niqab and abaya and all this kind of stuff. Obviously now, if you go to another part of Saudi Arabia where it's more, for example, liberal, and you see, a woman, she's not wearing hijab, that kind of becomes shocking. But for example, if you're in the West or you're in the UK or something, you wouldn't really bat an eyelid to it, So it's that kind of, I think that base morality, like you said, the praying at home to praying in the masjid. And, in terms of your development of a Revert, have you looked back on, for example, your experiences in Jahiliyyah, and this is something I discussed with another brother on the pod of kind of, when you become a Revert, sometimes you go through that stage of that detox, like you were saying, where you kind of want to almost shut off like everything, like your whole old life and all that kind of stuff. And then sometimes as you mature, you kind of look back and you see certain elements of your life before Islam. And obviously, like, not everything you were doing was bad. You know what I mean? There were elements of good in you, and there were blessings that Allah even gave you before Islam. And, you know, have any of those things like helped you kind of developed on your journey? Have you kind of like looked back at the skills that you had before Islam and tried to, you know, reuse them in a halal way? You know, for example, like we might have brothers who are like artists. They used to draw pictures of human beings, and then once they became Islam, they said, hey, I can use that talent, but do that in the framework of the Sharia.
Yeah, 100%, man. I'll say that there's a lot of things that early on, and the era that we came from, I feel like, you know, like I said, 15 years ago when you embraced Islam, the landscape was very different. You know, platforms like Instagram, I'm not even sure they were here. They were just been around. Platforms like, you know, definitely Snapchat and things like that was not here. You know, TikTok, YouTube was just in the building, finding its way. You know, there were so many things that were different. And I guess that coming from the background that we came from, especially I came from a musical background, and I had a lot of music on TV and on MTV Base and Channel U. So I feel like coming from that background, it was difficult. We had to kind of leave that alone. But at the same time, I feel like being a musician at the time, or I would say an artist, someone who could write and create poems and create poetry at how I saw it at its finest, is that it allowed me to be a speaker, or somebody that can speak and give a message and speak well and get my message well across to the people that I was trying to target, and the audience being people who had a similar lived experience to me. Or also sometimes I think as a rap poet, you can also bring people on a journey into a life that you live that they never lived, and they can feel that they were right there if you're able to deliver that you know, that rap correctly. So for me, I feel like, you know, leaving rap, not really doing the sheets, never done the sheets, even though I saw Moosa Nsubuga was doing his thing. And it wasn't really my thing. It was too close to home, too close to what I just left behind. And I think my love for it and the fact that the people that I was doing music with, I think the difference between me and Moosa Nsubuga was that the people he was doing music with weren't becoming successful, whereas the people I was doing music with were knocking through a lot of doors. And I feel like with him, he was one of the main artists. So for them to become successful, he had to stay behind. Whereas for me, we had a few artists who had a similar drive. And even when I left, even though it kind of fell apart to some extent, there were others who continued to dream and kind of didn't give up, so that they were really making noise while I was on my journey to Islam. So it was evident. People would see me and be like, yeah, I saw your man them, and yeah, they're doing well, man, they're doing this. And it'll be like, yeah, and then at the same time, we'll be like, but we're proud of you, man. We like the journey that you've done and the transition, and it's nice to see that you stuck on it and you haven't gone back. But I guess what we done then, especially Abu Bakr, he would come to me and say, come also, man, let's go and give dawah to the community, to the man them on the block. Like, come on, man, like, you're good at this, you know how to speak, you're this is not really my thing. Like, I never rap, but I can pick up a camera, I can record. And that's again coming from like doing music videos and stuff like that. And I think from the back of that, I'll say really Roadside to Islam was born. And then we just started putting cameras, you know, in front of, you know, reverts who were able to tell their message, whether that was Massacre, Moosa Nsubuga, myself, and other reverts. And I feel like, again, to me, even that I think was pioneering, because I always tell Abu Bakr, when I look at the youth that I was seeing now, and in brackets, the social or the influencer scene within the DAO stuff. Sometimes it's sad to see, and sometimes it's like, okay, we get it. But again, I feel like we came at a time where, again, we did it not to be famous or not to become influencers or anything like that. We just did it because we know we came from a bad space. And we know there was a lot of people that we were trying to help.
I think also, you know, back in the day as well, especially like being an influencer, being a YouTuber, back in those days, it wasn't really a thing, you know, and so it was like you couldn't really desire something that didn't really exist. It wasn't really on the horizon. And I think that the danger sometimes that I see now from a lot of the stuff that's going is like, you know, especially I'm here in Saudi, you know, sometimes I might come across particular individuals who are watching certain things where you feel like it kind of loses the element of being more directed dawah and more kind of form of like entertainment, which I
Yeah.
mean, it's got its harms and its benefits because, you know, one argument you could say, well, it's better that we have this kind of like Muslim based entertainment where you're watching something that's a bit more khair than watching something that's like, you know, non-Muslims doing some crazy stuff. But then at the same time, it kind of like some of the things, of course, not all of them, they kind of like entertainify da'wah, you know, in a way where it's like, I don't think back in those days it was really like that. It was more just like a kind of sincere, taking people on that sincere journey. So, you know, what do you think, you know, has kind of in that development of how that kind of dawah scene has developed in terms of social media and stuff?
Yeah, I feel like there's always a difference when a person hunts out of hunger and one does it out of leisure. I feel like there's always a difference. And I feel like when you come from an era where it was out of hunger and out of desperation is why we done what we did. And because that message wasn't being delivered to those young people. And like I said, the level of Islam that's available to us now on YouTube with the amount of, you know, brothers and sisters who have gained knowledge, especially the brothers who have graduated from, you know, Islamic universities across the world and have been
Yeah.
able to, you know, add value to what's going on now. I just feel like there's so much value out there in the market that
Yeah.
that for us, we never thought Islam as something which you can entertain the people by. We found it to be a serious message, and I just feel like it's always a thin line. And like I said, after a period of time, people would contact us and be like, "Oh yeah, how did you start this thing?" And we want to be like, "Yeah, like we want to build something like what you lot have built, and how did you do it?"
Yeah.
And it felt like it was some pathway to being where we were at, and we were like, "Listen, this came out of desperation to help people who we know were really putting in work out here. We wanted to see them guided to Islam, you know, and that's why it was very easy for us to say, you know what, our work is done here. Let's move on to the next
Yeah.
chapter. Where people till
Yeah.
today are like, oh man, why is that platform here? Why is it not gone? We're like, no, because there's enough knowledge. I don't see that there's anyone now who's growing up on the streets in the block who can't go into YouTube and type in what's Islam and get a load of videos, you know, from people who have actually studied Islam, who are like us, who came from the streets. So I'm talking about some of the students who are graduating are Mandan. So they're delivering to you Islam with knowledge, but also in a way that you understand. Whereas that wasn't that 15 years ago. So for us, it's very easy
Yeah.
to say, yeah, we're not needed. And as for the simple messages we gave out, then they're still available. But for us to say, okay,
Yeah.
we're in the space now. I remember one thing Abu Bakr said, the minute I feel like I have to create new content is the minute we have to knock it on the head. If it's not organic, we're doing it organic. The minute
Yeah.
I feel like, I need to do a video, and it's not because of a need.
Just the sake of doing a video kind of thing.
Yeah, I just want to do a video for the sake of doing a video. So because the channel's gonna go dead or this is gonna go dead. Because the minute that happened, we knock it on the head. And then when that happened, it was time to move on to the next chapter of what we wanted to do and try to stay sincere to this way of life that we've kind of embraced.
MashaAllah. So then, Akhi, when came about the kind of development of the Resole? Was that, you know, before or after? You know, you mentioned the brother Abu Bakr, who, you know, I'm aware he does his spot project in the Gambia. Was that, you know, before, after him, or, you know, was one inspired by the other? How was the dynamic there?
Yeah, so I was with Abu Bakr and Eid event in South London, and an auntie came to us by the name of Sister Khadija. And she was like, oh, Abu Bakr, man, you're from the Gambia, right? And he was like, yeah. She goes, I'm from there too, man, and I love what you do, Roadside to Islam. You know, you should come and do something in the Gambia, man. I think a lot of people will support you and appreciate it. Like, a lot of work needs to be done. And Abu Bakr hadn't really gone back home and looked at the Gambia in such a light before that moment. So I feel like after that, you know, went back, visit his family, friends, took a flight, and then he kind of saw Gambia for the first time in a different light, in a different space. And I think from there was really, from that moment on, was the birth of the Spot Project, going back and forth, supporting independent orphanages, to realize that if he wanted to really make an impact, he would have to start from the ground up and build his own. And I think that was the birth of that. And then I think there was a point where early on, before the school was built and we were still building it, there was an opportunity, and I flew out there, me, Abu Bakr, Abu Osama, a few guys. He showed us around, and we were a part of, actually, after the land had been purchased, we were helping actually build the school with our own hands, putting the bricks on, which was a major part. And I thank him till this day because of what's come from it, knowing that we were able to put bricks on that masjid that now does a lot of the work. So I think that little period of time, and that was, I think, the first time I had gone back to Africa in terms of helping and making a difference. So again, I always tell him on my return back to the UK, I said to Abu Bakr, look, we need to do some projects here in the UK because this is our base. This is where we spend a lot of the time. So it will be sad that we only get to do fair when we're away. I said there's so much of our time that's not being utilized if we're here in the UK, and the only time we only get to get our hands on and get physical is away. And I said, as much as we travel, because a lot of us were traveling, going to the Middle East and going to other countries, we say that's not home. And that's not going to be home for any foreseeable future, just because of how the systems are over there. You got to kind of add value to where you're at, and if you're not adding value, you know how it is over there. Then they cut ties and they send you back. But where do they always send us back? They send us back where our passports are based, whatever passport we have. And I said, that's the UK.
Yeah.
So I'd say when we hit the UK, and I've been there, done that, and I've had enough experiences where I've seen people in the Middle East for 25 years and come back to the UK and feel lost and not have that true ownership of anything going on. Is because, they were living for the moment and living for where we were. We said to ourselves from early on, that's not us, and it's not going to be us. And we need to do something so that even when we step away and we come back, we still have something here that connects us to our new way of life, and also giving back and keeps us busy with giving back. So yeah, man. So I think Resole was an idea I gave to him initially. It was going to be a spot project, but he was so busy and doing so much with what was going on in the Gambia. So I told him, no problem, I'm going to brand it. Because I think originally I called it Kick Poverty. And I said, let's kick poverty by using footwear. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, let's just make it like a UK project, which is under the banner of Spot. But he was just busy. He liked the idea, was on it, so it makes sense. But right now, it's going to take us out the best part of a year, he said. I think the earliest I can revisit this idea is a year. And I said a year is a long time in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to start thinking that you have that time, when we're always wishing and praying that Allah allows us to meet next Ramadan. That if it's not promised, that we need to start getting to work. So I got to work, designed the brand, designed the logo. I was in a group with a few brothers, and the group was an entrepreneur group of Muslims. There was about 4 of us that all had brands. We were building. I had my own sportswear brand at the time called Mount Uhud. Mount Uhud was doing a lot of good stuff in terms of kind of breaking barriers, like getting into the Hype Beast magazine for some of the stuff that I was doing from early on. It kind of allowed me to know even that. And I think, again, that came from my pre-Islamic experiences of just knowing that, I was just a kid from South London who was rapping, and one day I sat down in my living room and I saw myself on MTV Base. I think when that happened, that allowed me to know that, you can really, make moves. Like, I never thought one day I'll see myself on that box. You know what I'm saying? I never thought I'd ever see myself on the TV in people's homes and kind of walk down the streets and people be like, I know you, that you're so-and-so. So I think that experience just before embracing Islam allowed me to know that a lot of things were possible in life. So even when I done the sportswear brand, I knew that, we can go to levels and we can get to a certain space with it. But for me, the sportswear brand, and something I always tell people, is that even though it was making money and stuff, I just never felt like it was connected to Islam, how I wanted it to be. I never thought I thought like it's good making money, but I made money in Jahiliyyah. Like, I left that for this. I didn't embrace Islam to chase money, wake up every morning, making designs, checking on inventory, have I sent it out? It was good and stuff, but I was like, this can't be life. I got to be connected to dawah, charity or something. So I think that's when I went back to the drawing board and Resole came out as a brand. And then when Resole came, the mission was to give back shoes, to the homeless. I think that was the easiest and the clearest poverty that I could see within the UK. You know, I saw once I opened my eyes to homelessness, I started to see it everywhere, started to see the impact it had on our society, started to have conversations with people that was homeless, started to realize that people that were homeless came from all walks of life. You know, it wasn't just one set type of person. It wasn't that stereotypical idea of what we thought homelessness was. And I started to see how we stereotyped homelessness just the same way people stereotype Islam and think that everything, you know, is a certain type of thing. And then I think that allowed me to understand it more. And then since then, like I said, that was like 3.5 years ago. Yeah, we've just kind of elevated to where we have now.
MashaAllah. So in terms of that development as well, was it mainly kind of like a solo led, or did you have, like, you know, a team of support? Like you mentioned, you had the brothers in the WhatsApp group. I think I've seen, you know, on some of your socials, you know, there's a couple of brothers who sometimes are involved. How did you go about meeting them and delegating in terms of that kind of venture?
Yeah, so I had some brothers on from early on who kind of supported me and was a big support network in every journey. Some sisters as well. I kind of made, you know, I wanted it to be a space for, you know, creatives and people who were, you know, like people who just wanted to do more within the community.
Yeah.
I kind of made like, this is our project, this is our space. You know, we can take it to wherever we want to take it. All we need to do is put time, effort in, be disciplined, be consistent, you know, and support each other. We can get there. So early on, as any project takes place, you know, a lot of people have a lot of passion, a lot of drive. And as time's gone on, I think life has hit a few of my support network, and things have got a bit more, you know, I would say difficult within like just family life and things like that. So they've had to drop off. But my core support has always been a support I can call upon any time. But I was very clear in the work that I'm doing, and the conversation I have with Abu Bakr, as big as his team is that everything and the buck falls on the founder, you know?
Yeah.
And if we don't get up every morning and we don't strive and we don't make it happen, then it inevitably won't, you know, after the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I just feel like within that space, you know, we've just been driven, and I think it's the same drive that I had previously. I think it helps to also hit milestones every year, new milestones in the work that we're doing, being recognized in the sneaker space, you know, by some of the biggest companies in the world and brands in the world, and being able to see where we fit in with those brands and being able to create something which is Muslim owned and Muslim led, but also benefits the whole community. I think I always said to myself, when I do a project, I don't want to do a project that's preaching to the converted. I'm not here to just do a project that, you know, especially as a Muslim, knowing that Islam's here to help and to kind of be an answer to the problems of humanity as a whole, but we're only preaching to the converted. So I always said to myself, being a Revert, it will be silly now that I've embraced Islam and I don't really do anything that helps non-Muslims. Like, how does that happen? That was one of the biggest complaints that I had, that when I was a non-Muslim, I didn't really see too much interactions between the Muslims to their non-Muslim neighbors and friends. And now here I am, I'm Muslim, and I'm falling into the same bracket. I was like, no, that can't happen. So I wanted to lead a project that helped anybody who was in a certain situation, you know, anybody. So I would say 80% of our work, you know, is supporting non-Muslims. I'll say 20% of that, depending on the categories. I'll say if we're dealing with refugees, a lot of refugees are Muslims that we deal with at Resole, and asylum seekers. But when we're just dealing with homelessness, that's 80% non-Muslim. And we're able to have a good relationship with our non-Muslim in brackets clients that we support, or service users. A lot of our service users, you know, who are non-Muslim, but they know that Musa's Muslim, the founder's Muslim, and, you know, and so I always try to be visibly Muslim. You know, I'm able to have conversations. I'm able to meet reverts, you know, who I wouldn't think they were reverts when first approaching them, that are homeless, you know, and I'm just thinking that they're just normal, you know, English lads, you know, gone through a bit of trouble, and then they greet me with the full salam, you know, tell me about their conversion in prison, tell me how difficult it is to find halal food, while being homeless, from soup
Yeah.
kitchens and things like that, and tell me some of the importance that they need. And it allows me to realize, hold on, there's more that we can do and there's more that needs to be done.
At what point, Akhi, was it more like your passion for sneakers that kind of like led you into the whole, I want to do something to do with sneakers? Or was there a point where you were kind of like looking at homelessness and you just thought like, you know, one of the most important things for you know, this group of people is footwear?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to give back. And at the time, all I had to give was trainers, I'd say. And if I looked at from the best of things that I had, and I feel like I wanted to give back, and I feel like for me, clothing wasn't me making a sacrifice. I could easily give you any of my clothes. At the time when I embraced Islam, I'm not rocking designers in terms of clothing. I'm happy to go to your Zara's and just buy a t-shirt and a tracksuit and keep it moving, you know, and I was comfortable. I didn't have to go to the high-end designer brands. So that wasn't really me making a sacrifice. But when it came to my trainers were always fresh and it was always at the high end. But for me to give you a pair of trainers, it meant a lot because my trainers were never just a standard pair of trainers. So I feel like that was the sacrifice. So meeting a homeless person, and I think Allah tested me because it's nice and easy to say you want to help people, but then you meet someone that's homeless and then you ask them, how can I help you? And they look at your fresh trainers and be like, yeah, a pair of those wouldn't go amiss. And you're like, really? And everything that I've got is my trainers. And they're like, yeah, because, you know, I walk everywhere. Mine are wet, you know, dirty. You know, if I had a fresh pair and a fresh pair of socks, I'll be good to go. And it's like, okay, I hear you. So then you make that move, go back home. You're looking around, nothing's really old, because the first thing that comes to your head is that you got to give them something old, something used, something that's not fresh because they're homeless. And then your full process kicks in and you think, what are you doing? Like, why are you looking for something old? Why does it have to be something that's used? Why can't it be something that's fresh? Something, you know, newly bought, something recently bought. Why does it have to be something old all the time when we're giving to people that's in need? But I think I was able to click out of it straight away and find myself a pair of trainers that were fresh, but I just weren't wearing them a lot, you know? So I went down, gave him the pair, and then I think that was the birth from that moment then to start giving out more of my trainers, friends and family giving me trainers to give out because they heard that, you know, once a week I was going out and helping the homeless with shoes, because it was like a once a week thing I'll do. Maybe on a Friday night, I'll just hit the towns and give out some shoes. And then from then it grew. I think that was the birth of it then, really.
MashaAllah. And I think, you know, that ties into that, the Islamic values of, you know, giving in sadaqah of what you would be pleased with. Like, you're not going and giving something that, you know, if someone's to give that to you, you'd be like, I'm not really sure about that. But you're actually giving something that, you know, you yourself would utilize or use. And, you know, obviously in terms of like being a founder, you know, your entrepreneurial spirit, there's always kind of like a success or story or two, you know, that you're probably particularly proud of. What, in terms of Resole, do you think is one of the moments that you are particularly proud of, where you saw like, this is, you know, really making a impact that, you know, I wanted it to make?
I feel like I think moments are really helping people that actually need the support, that really need it, like getting these pair of shoes or trainers at this particular time in my life is going to make a massive impact. You know, I've given people shoes who needed a certain pair of footwear for a job, a particular job, and right now they're, you know, homeless, but they're still seeking work, and they've been told to start the next couple of days they need a certain type of footwear, but then they don't really have money to buy that. So helping that individual and hearing that story and seeing how Allah has aligned me in their journey to be a helper is massive. I feel like people messaging me and saying, I've just saw someone who's homeless and they're sleeping at this location in London, and I think they can really do with your services. Even that for me is an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that people see people in need, and somehow they believe that I'm able to help someone who's in need. And when I'm in more need than anyone from my Lord, you know what I mean, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm someone who's just, we're all just mere human beings in need of Allah. But people in this dunya can see people that's in need, and Allah has put you in a category of helpers within the dunya who are those that help people that's in need. And when someone thinks of that, because I think deep, I don't just think on the surface level, I just think like, Ross, so you're telling me that because for me, whenever you're in help, the people that come to your head that can help you are normally the closest people to you, you know, people that they hold a good position within your full process. That's why you think, well, who can help me? Oh, let me call that brother. Let me call that sister. Let me call that cousin. Let me call that family member. So when someone sees someone in need of help and they think, let me contact Musa from Resole, he can help them. I'm like, Allahu Akbar, when did I become that person? You know, it reminds me of, you know, what we've become as an organization. And then also just seeing I think some of the great, proudest moments is seeing Resole brand next to the Adidas brand. Like, we done a project for the Stephen Lawrence Day, and seeing the logo, you know, up in lights, for lack of better words, next to the Adidas logo. And I'm thinking, this is something that's like a year and a half old, and it's side by side. Adidas have put together this project, and they've put our logo side by side with theirs, you know, and I think it kind of allows us to know where to go, because that's a $1 billion brand. Or being invited to the Nike offices as a organization that they want to have a conversation with, and how to make a difference and make an impact, and lead it, and letting you lead the interview or the meeting in terms of they want to gain knowledge and experience from your work, trying to understand your value. So I think we've dealt with a lot of the big brands, big high stores or high street brands as well, like Foot Locker, and having those meetings with, you know, regional directors and stuff like that. For me, they're big moments, because I think to myself, you know, someone who started this, you know, from storage in his house to then having a spot and having a shop, and then knowing that, you know, we hold a level of value within the market that we're in, you know, and just having people from that space. Like, I think I met someone who said they was at a Jordan, event that they were hosting, and they were talking about sustainability and making change in the world. And so someone got up on stage and they mentioned your brand as one of the brands that was leading within sustainability and making an impact. And I wasn't there, you know, I wasn't there, I wasn't invited, but there were people in the room who, you know, felt enough to make note of it. And it's like, mashallah, it's like, okay, this is where we are. So I think those things for me as an entrepreneur and someone who is pushing off the ground has allowed us to know that we have something here. And again, which is like Muslim led, Muslim founded. And that's important to me. And I think it's important for me as well to know the difference, because I think as a Revert, I always thought I needed an Islamic brand, and not realizing that brands are Islamic based on your morals and your principles, not based on what you scream and how you label it. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because it can be labeled as a Islamic brand, but if its morals and principles are not, then that's not Islamic. You just titling it that. You know what I'm saying? So I realized I have to lead as a Muslim, someone who lives by Islam, and then my morals have to come in with what I do and what I don't do. You know what I'm saying? And try my best to uphold to that, and also not connect it to Islam, where if I do wrong, then Islam's doing wrong, you know? So that's why I always say that we're Muslim led, because Muslims are allowed to make mistakes and allowed to fall short, where Islam doesn't fall short and Islam doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah, mashallah. And obviously as well, you know, I'm sure across this journey, there's been ups and downs. There's been situations where you're proud of, and I'm sure there's been, you know, some people often, you know, might say a failure. Some people might perceive that as just, you know, Allah putting them in a situation to learn and grow from that, or protecting them from something that wasn't meant to be. But what kind of situations have you had that, you know, have been the kind of difficult aspects, or what people may call quote unquote failures, or things that you had to, like, you know, reanalyze within that journey?
I'll say there's been definitely a lot of learning curves. One of them is the team that you have around you. I think initially the team was founded on love and friendship rather than expertise and and experience. I feel like whenever you're in organizations, it's great if you can do both. If you can have people that you love and are close to who are experienced and have the expertise, is great. But if you don't, then you need the experts. It's not great having a doctor who is your cousin who dreams of being one but really has no expertise and no qualification. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You rather go with a
yeah,
stranger that
yeah,
you don't know. And I feel like with
yeah.
any position, it's the exact same thing. I feel like it's always better to go with a stranger that you don't know if they have the expertise and the qualifications to actually deliver on the
Mm,
position that you need filled to get you to that place that you want to be at. But I think initially starting, there was a lot of, friends and loved ones and people who were close to me who I put in positions who, and I always say when you put someone in that position or you give someone the opportunity to do it, um, you can't blame them. You got to blame yourself. So I'm always someone who's kind of more critical to myself. Because like the analogy I gave, my cousin's like a inspired doctor through his full process, but he hasn't got no qualifications, and I let him do something silly on me, then it's me to blame, not him. Do you know what I'm saying? So I feel like people that I put on early and I gave positions within the organizations that maybe they weren't ready for. I think that was my learning curve because it sets you back. You have to go again. You find yourselves having to do the same work twice, rather than measuring twice and cutting once. You find yourself having to double up again on your work because, like I said, you only measured once and then have to end up cutting 3 or 4 times. So I feel like that was impactful. But for me, for every situation that I learned from, I think I grew. I grabbed mentors that I have around me, some that are very good within business and working within community work. Those mentors, I was able to increase my relationship with them. And now they're some of the closest people to me, learn a lot. So I feel like with all the obstacles, even till now, we still have obstacles, but within obstacles, we find ways to kind of go again, re-angle, pivot, and try to, hit higher than before. And I think that happens every year. Every year we step into a space, we start it with a bang and it takes us to another level. I think last year when we done some adverts with Nike, we done the Face magazine, we done, what did we do? There's some things that I always miss out, but we done a lot of things last year, the Rob Report. These were
Yeah,
like major steps within the whole industry. And then we start this year off with, we're halfway through now, we're thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to, stay relevant in our space, continue to deliver the work that we're delivering to a high standard. And as a charity space, as a funded space, how do we go from being funded and always looking for funding to being self-sufficient and taking it to another level? And then we pivot again, we add sneaker cleaning to what we're doing, and that grows and that starts to move. We do a documentary on sneakers with Channel 4 that's going to air this month or next month. And that puts us again on terrestrial TV in terms of who we are and what we're doing. And I feel like that continues to happen in the space because we continue to make contact with people who have only met us this year, where you get people that, oh, I work for so-and-so organizations. The first time I ever come across it, love the initiative, love everything you do. How can I be of support? But I guess you can only be there to get that support if you can continuously grow. And like some of my biggest achievements is that 3 years on from getting our store, we still have it because a lot of businesses go under. We got our store during the COVID period. So my biggest achievement now for Resole is actually still being here because a lot of new organizations, a lot of new companies within the first 2 to 3 years, they're no longer here. And I've seen the power of actually still being here because like when we started working with Nike last year, Nike had seen us very early on in our journey, but they were like, we didn't know when it was right to work with you. You know what I'm saying? So 18 months later, after initially spotting us, we work together. Foot Locker's the same. So a lot of organizations and brands will see you 2 to maybe a year to 2 before actually working with you. If they come around to work with you, you no longer exist. That's now a missed opportunity. because we don't know the unseen, right? We're sitting there thinking, oh, nobody wants to work. What's going on? And you're not busy in what you're doing. You miss out on these opportunities. So I say that to say this is that there's most probably big organizations and brands that saw us coming up to 2 years ago who want to work now. And we have to be here for that to happen. And that's one of the things that I'll always say to people: be patient in your journey. As long as what you're doing is fisabilillah and you know what you're doing, you also enjoy it, be patient and continue to knock away and just kind of be clear on what you're trying to achieve and the direction that you're trying to go in.
So then in terms of that, you know, and being that founder and setting those kind of targets, how do you actually go about like actualizing those targets in terms of, do you have like yearly targets and then longer term targets? And, you know, are those the kind of things that help your drive and keep your consistency?
Yeah. I think year one for us was establishing ourselves within the community space, you know, Resole community. Year one was to establish who we are, what we were doing. And for people to go, okay, this organization exists. I think year two was to, what I wanted to do last year was to kind of enhance our relationships within the community, enhance my relationships to make it solid. Because when you meet someone for the first time, it's 50-50 whether you keep that relationship or not, based on how you deal with each other. It was very important for me that I keep my relationship with Mike, keep my relationship with Foot Locker, build new relationships with Axel, Arigato, BSTN. These were massive brands that I was like, okay, let me build new relationships and solidify them. So year two was to solidify our relationships within the brand space and also within the community space with the soup kitchens and the food shelters and the food banks
kind of
that we were working
grassroots
with.
elements.
Yeah, the grassroots. So I wanted to solidify our relationships with the people that we were going to work with and to build those partnerships. So year two was doing that. Year three, which we're in now in the shop, was always to solidify ourselves as a brand and to add to our service a product. What is your product that you add? Take yourself to that level now, being self-sufficient. And I think sneaker cleaning is for that. You know, the sneaker laundry service is no different from the clothes laundry service of cleaning your clothes. And there isn't a part of the world that you go to, but there's a laundry where you put your clothes in and people clean it for a fee. You know, you drop off your clothes, they get washed and cleaned, you pick them up. Shoes are no different. And a lot of the time shoes have a bigger price value, but they've never had that space to go to, especially in the West. But that market has grown. It's $1 billion industry. And being an organization who's distributed over 20,000 pairs of shoes, you know, we've gone past the £2 million mark of shoes donated. A load of those shoes, 85% were cleaned. We've learned how to clean shoes before we give them out. So now how do we add that value to the customer who wants to donate a pair, but also wants to get his shoes clean? So we become that drop-off point where not only can I come in store and get my shoes clean, repaired, and brought back to a standard that I'm happy with, and that helps with sustainability and having to continue to buy and waste. But I can also drop off some trainers that I'm no longer in love with, you know, pre-love sneakers that can go to charity. So I think we've created a model now that we can sustain anywhere in the world. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Depending on where we are in the world, it will look different. You know, so we're having those conversations, you know, of taking Resole, like I say, to the Arab world, to the Middle East, to parts of Africa, like South Africa. And we're having those conversations with people that want to see us in those spaces because of the community aspect and because of the sustainability aspect.
Yeah. And I think that what you're doing there with the cleaning as well, it kind of comes back full circle into that, you know, Islamic kind of concept of waqf, where you've got that almost like, you know, the profit functioning element that feeds back in order to, you know, help provide for the non-profit functionality, which, you know, at the end of the day, that is going to be, you know, what helps the project in terms of sustainability and longevity. You know, that you know, inshallah, obviously we know one day we're all going to die, but if you create this brand and you create this business that now has longevity through the generations, that can support itself and the work it does, I mean, the legacy is left there, you know.
100%. And I feel like what a lot of people do, and which we done backwards. And I think for me as a Muslim, it was very important for me to have the identity, because I think I did it with Mount Uhud. Had I done it backward the way I've done it with Resole, I think maybe that brand would have continued. Is that a lot of brands build their brand and their selling and their selling point and their product, and then they build the foundation, which is the charity aspect. Whereas we built our foundation and our charity aspect, then we built the product after that around it. Because for me, it was very important that I was working around the space of giving back and connecting me to my way of life in terms of having an impact within the society and the community that I'm in. Because I felt like a product is to make money. And I feel like if I want to make money, there's millions of ways for me to make halal money. And it doesn't involve me having to build a foundation or a charity. But I feel like if I can build a foundation and a charity and a community project, then I can build a product around that after, then I've kind of fulfilled or hit the markers that I wanted to hit early on. And then I don't have that question of, okay, I've got this amazing brand. What can I do to help people with it? And then you start thinking, is this going to work? Is that going to work? Rather, we built, the initial foundation, the project, and then the brand came easy after that.
Yeah, mashallah. So just to, obviously I'm getting conscious of the time. We've had a nice conversation, and often what I like to ask the brothers, especially, the entrepreneurial brothers who are, involved in their projects and stuff. Just, if you had, for example, an unlimited budget, or like, just a huge amount of cash or funding that came in where it was just open, you could do whatever you want, what would be the first thing that you would do?
I think for us, like you said, I think it'll be to future-proof the organization to the best of our ability. You said, I think it's very important that you build projects and brands that are legacy inspired. We're here to create legacies, things that outlive us, outlive our children, and are generational and continue to go on to the next generation. Sometimes I come across charities that started as projects, that are UK based, and we're looking, they're like 150 years old, 200 years old. And you look like that's a generational project that kind of gone through the times. And now it might have started as a £200-300 organization, and it's now a multi-million-pound organization supporting and helping and making a difference within, the world and within its space. And I think for me, that would be it, future-proof Resole, so it can do what it was set up to do, regardless of who's running it. Do you know what I'm saying? Regardless of just me, if someone else, even if I, may Allah forbid, turn crazy tomorrow and start saying, no, I'm going to live this Jahiliyyah lifestyle, I've kind of I've kind of future-proofed it to that. It'll be like, okay, you go and live your lifestyle, but we're going to continue doing what we're doing, because this is how you set it up. This is how it's going. So if you want to live that life, you live it, but this was set up to do fair, it's going to continue to do it. And I think that's what's important. Or if, we pass away and then our children somehow are involved in an organization and they choose to do something crazy, it's also protected from them and protected from anyone who wants to turn it into something that it's not. I think that's the first thing that I would, put into play.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair, bro. I appreciate you joining us, man. We got there in the end, and I hope it's a fruitful conversation that other people can benefit from, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair for having me. I appreciate it. See me out whenever I get a chance. We're always busy, but for me to speak to our community and to be a part of it, just as their brother in Islam, it's always important for me, man. And also, just if there's someone on the other side of the screen that's, having doubt, wanting to make a difference, and you say one line, sometimes, because I watch a load of podcasts, a load of talks, and sometimes I watch like an hour-long lecture, 2-hour-long lecture from one of my favorite, teachers, like Abu Osama, for an existence. And he would just say one line, and that's all I came for. It took me 2 hours, but I just needed that one line. Just that one line. I was like, okay, I've got the gem. That's the gem that I was searching for. And I had to sit down there for 2 hours, and it was beneficial as a whole, but that gem there is what I needed. So sometimes, if I'm able to be part of that, then I'm always ready to sit down and have conversations.
Barakallah feek, bro. Take care, and inshallah, hope to see more of yourself and Resole in the near future.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa salam wa barakatuh.
Life is one big road with a lot of signs, signs and more signs. You gotta make up your mind to face reality all the time. No.